Hello everyone, welcome to English. With future, my name is Prakara. I am a 23-year-old girl from a small town in Texas. I was always shy and quiet. I loved reading books, but when it came to speaking English fluently, I struggled so much. I felt embarrassed every time I opened my mouth in front of others. In my high school, I used to avoid group discussions and presentations. I felt like my words got stuck. I could write well, but when it was time to speak, my tongue would freeze. I remember once in my English class, the teacher asked me to read aloud, and I stumbled so badly that everyone laughed. That moment broke something inside me. I cried alone in my room that night, and I promised myself that I would never speak in public again. I kept this promise for years. I became a silent observer. I avoided making friends because I feared judgment. I feared my broken sentences and shaky voice. But deep down, I knew I could not live like this forever. I dreamed of becoming a teacher, but how could I teach if I could not speak fluently? This fear became my biggest wall. I wanted to break it, but I did not know how. One day, everything changed when my younger brother told me about a YouTube video. It was about a girl who learned to speak English fluently in 6 months. She practiced every day in front of a mirror. She made mistakes, but she kept going. Her story touched my heart. I decided to give myself a second chance. I stood in front of the mirror and said my name out loud over and over. I practiced simple sentences. I watched English movies with subtitles. I repeated every line. I felt silly sometimes, but I did not stop. I joined an online English speaking group. I was scared, my voice shook, my hands trembled, but I forced myself to say hello. I introduced myself in broken sentences, but the people in that group were kind. They encouraged me. They clapped for every small step I took. Day by day, I noticed tiny changes. I could say full sentences without fear. I could hold short conversations. I felt proud of myself for the first time in years. I still made mistakes, but I smiled through them. I learned that mistakes are part of learning. I started talking to my family in English. I recorded my voice and listened to my pronunciation. I corrected myself. I watched videos of motivational speakers and I shadowed their words. I read books aloud and underlined new words. I built my vocabulary slowly. Months passed and I became braver. I gave my first presentation in my college class. My heart pounded, but I spoke without stopping. I saw smiles on faces instead of laughter. I felt alive. I felt strong. I felt like I was winning the biggest battle of my life. My journey is still going. I still practice every day. I still learn new words. I still dream of becoming a teacher. And now I believe that one day I will stand on a stage and tell the world that Prakara never gave up. I will remind others that no matter how broken your English is today, you can make it beautiful tomorrow. The day I gave my first presentation, something changed deep inside me. I felt a fire that I had never felt before. I realized that the fear which had controlled my life for so many years was nothing but a chain I had wrapped around myself. I smiled all day because I knew that Prakara was no longer the same girl. After that day, I decided to make speaking English a daily habit. I would wake up early and spend 15 minutes speaking to myself in front of the mirror. I would pick a topic, any topic, and just talk, even if my words were broken, even if my sentences were incomplete. I kept talking. I kept pushing. I started a small notebook where I wrote 5 new words every day. I would write their meanings and use them in my daily sentences. I realized that words were like bricks, and every new word I learned was helping me build the house of my confidence. I felt excited every time I learned something new. One evening while sitting in the park, I saw a little girl trying to ride a bicycle. She fell again and again, but her mother kept cheering her on. I smiled because I saw myself in that child. I was also learning to ride the bicycle of English. I was falling, but I was getting back up every time. Slowly, I began to participate in class discussions. I raised my hand even when my heart was pounding. I made mistakes, but instead of feeling ashamed, I told myself that mistakes were proof. I was trying. My teachers noticed the change. They started appreciating my efforts. They gave me more chances to speak. There was a time when I could not even order food in English. But now I started going to cafes and ordering with confidence. I talked to strangers, I asked questions. I smiled even when my words were not perfect. I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of. I also started helping others. I joined an online community where people from different countries practiced English together. I shared my journey. I encouraged others. I told them that if Prakara can do it, they can too. I received messages from people thanking me, and it filled my heart with joy. But this journey was not always easy. There were days when I felt frustrated. There were moments when I wanted to quit. Sometimes I would mispronounce words and people would correct me. Sometimes I would forget words in the middle. I remembered the girl who cried alone in her room. I remembered the fear that had controlled me for years. I remembered the dream of becoming a teacher. I held on to these memories because they kept me going. They gave me strength when I felt weak. One day I gave a speech in front of 50 people. It was not perfect, but I spoke with courage. I shared my story. I told them about my struggle. I saw tears in the eyes of some listeners. They clapped for me, they cheered for me. That moment became one of the happiest days of my life. I walked off the stage with tears in my eyes. I whispered to myself that Prakara is no longer the girl who hides. Prakara is brave. Now Prakara can speak now. And this is just the beginning. The day I gave my first speech changed everything for me. I realized that the real enemy was not the English language, but the fear I carried inside me for so many years. I felt like chains were falling off one by one. I started to look at myself differently. I started to believe that Prakara was not weak anymore. I promised myself I would never stop learning. I increased my practice time. I would wake up every morning and listen to English audio while brushing my teeth. I would repeat every line softly to myself. I started writing a diary in English where I described my day, my feelings, my dreams, and my fears. One day I came across a video of a man who had learned English in 1 year by practicing shadowing technique. I copied his method. I would listen to small clips from TED Talks or movies and repeat every sentence word by word, copying their tone, speed, and emotion. It felt difficult in the beginning, but soon it became fun. I started using every moment of my day as an opportunity to speak. I would describe everything I saw. I would talk to myself while walking on the road, while washing dishes, even before sleeping. Every single day my tongue became smoother, my voice stronger, and my heart lighter. My friends began to notice the change. They would tell me, "Prakara, you sound so confident now." Their words made me smile, but deep inside, I knew I was still on the journey. I still made mistakes. I still paused to find words, but I had stopped feeling ashamed because I had learned that perfection was not the goal, progress was. One of the biggest moments came when I was invited to speak in a community event about overcoming fear. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but I stood there in front of nearly 100 people and I shared my story. I spoke about how I used to hide, how I used to fear every English sentence, how I used to feel like a failure. There were still tough days, there were times when I felt stuck, when words refused to come out, when I felt like giving up, but every time I closed my eyes and remembered the shy, broken girl I used to be, and how far I had already come, and that gave me the courage to keep going. I started recording small English videos and posting them online. Even though my accent was not perfect, even though I was nervous, that people appreciated the honesty, they appreciated the effort, and slowly I built a small community where we all supported each other and grew together. I realized that speaking English was never just about language. It was about facing the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of not being enough. And once I started facing those fears, I began to win battles, not just in language, but in life itself. One morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and I smiled because I saw someone I had waited years to meet. I saw a brave, determined girl who refused to give up. I saw Prakala, the girl who once feared every English word, now standing tall, speaking not perfectly but powerfully. Heart. I felt like I had unlocked a door that was always closed for me. I was not just speaking English. I was discovering a new version of myself, the version who was brave, who was free, who was proud to be Prakara. I started living my life differently. I began to believe in the power of consistency every single day. I showed up, I practiced my sentences. I recorded my voice, I spoke to strangers. I celebrated my small victories like they were the biggest moments of my life. I still remember the time when I was invited to a live webinar to share my journey. I sat there, my heart racing, my hands cold, but I reminded myself of the promise I had made. I closed my eyes for a moment and whispered to myself that Prakara can do this. I took a deep breath and began to speak. The words flowed from my heart. I shared every fear, every failure, every tear that I had hidden for so long, and I saw the audience smiling. I saw their eyes shining. I knew they felt what I felt. I knew I was not alone anymore, and when I finished they clapped, and some even cried. I cried too. But this time they were tears of pride, not pain. That day taught me something very powerful. I learned that people do not care about perfect English, they care about real stories. They care about honesty. They care about courage. And I realized that every word I spoke from my heart had the power to touch someone else's life. I kept moving forward. I kept practicing. I kept teaching others. I started volunteering to help children learn English. I started a small online group where people from different countries came together to practice their speaking skills. I shared my mistakes, my lessons, my progress, and I watched others grow too. It was like magic. I saw people who were just like me, shy, broken, scared, but when they spoke, when they tried, when they failed and tried again, I saw the light in their eyes. I saw them standing taller. I saw them becoming their own heroes, and I knew deep inside that this journey was bigger than just learning a language. One evening I sat by the window watching the sunset, and I thought about the girl I used to be. I thought about the nights I cried, the moments I wanted to give up, and I smiled because that girl never gave up. She kept walking, even when it was dark, even when it was lonely. She kept walking, and one day she arrived here. I whispered softly that Prakara is not afraid anymore. I whispered that dreams do come true, not because they are easy, but because we refuse to quit, and I felt peace inside. My heart at peace. I had waited for my entire life. I knew my journey was not over. I knew I would keep learning. I would keep growing. I would keep helping others. To anyone who listens to my story, I want to say one thing: never stop believing in yourself, never let fear decide your future. You can fall, you can fail, you can feel broken, but if you rise every time, you will become unstoppable, just like I did, just like Prakalra did.